Hi, this is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and we've had another week of crazy comic book sales, and I'm here to talk about some of the high sales that stuck out to me that I thought, everybody else might want to hear about. And to go along with it, I've also got an unboxing of two books that happen to be on that list, so stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. It seemed like people enjoyed this video, and it's fun for me because I like watching these sales, and so I like talking about them. And I saw again some really high sales this week, record high sales, and I think it's worth talking about. I'm definitely not seeing a decrease in prices right now. So the first one I want to talk about is actually kind of a twofer, and so that is Daredevil #1. Now I don't have a copy of that book, so I can't pull out one of those, and kind of show it here. But this week we saw a CGC 7.0 sell for $16,200. The prior high at this grade was $10,300, and that was just on March 14th. So, $6,000 in 2 weeks. And before that, on January 19th, the high was $6,544. And from, most of 2019 to 2020, it was a $3,500 to $4,500 book. So, that book has quadrupled since, kind of early 2020, which, my thought has always been that Daredevil #1 has been one of the most undervalued Silver Age keys, like the big keys. And I think it's finally getting its day, and it's all because of that crossover with Spider-Man. Now, the high sale this week wasn't totally unexpected because an 8.0 sold on March 15th for $22,200, which, was a jump from around $6,000 to $7,000 for most of 2019 or 2020. So the prices on that book are really getting, pretty astounding. Now, that's going to lead us to the first book that I'm going to take out of this box. So I'll unbox this and then we'll talk about that. All right. So it's kind of a freak occurrence that I have these books in boxes. I've been kind of slow on opening stuff, and it's actually worked out extremely well in this current environment we're in with comics because I bought this book on January 17th, so it's been a little over 2 months, and it had been sitting in a box, and it's basically doubled in price in that time. So what I want to talk about are alternatives to Daredevil #1, and one of the things that I've really seen, I've mentioned this in some other videos, is that these big Silver Age keys have been getting extremely expensive. And so what people are doing is they're moving down to secondary and tertiary books that have those same characters that they really love, but aren't that, that first appearance has just gotten so expensive. And so this book is Amazing Spider-Man #16. And so this is the first crossover that Daredevil had in another major title. And it was also, he's also still wearing his yellow suit, which if you're not, too familiar with Daredevil, he started in this yellow suit for the first 6 issues, then transitioned to the red suit in issue 7. And this book actually also had another record sale this week. So a CGC 6.5, same grade as this one, sold for $1,020 this week. And, kind of for comparison, I paid $600 for this on January 17th. So that is a pretty substantial jump over a very short period of time. And the prior high for this was $720. And that was going back to November of 2020. And I was really surprised it took this book this long to get it heated up like this, because the whole reason that Daredevil has spiked is because of the rumors of his appearance in the next Spider-Man movie. And to me, it's just natural that this should have been the book that was just spiking with that, because it's the first time that they meet. It's such a big key in that realm, and so I think we're finally starting to see that move. Now, this is expensive across a lot of grades, but it is possible to still find them, relatively affordably at a low grade, but it is starting to move up. And so that's why I wanted to talk about a few other options in addition to this one. And the first one is one that I just mentioned, and that's Daredevil number 7. I'll put a picture up here. And that's his first red suit. I feel like this one has just been so undervalued for so long because that's the iconic suit that everybody knows him as wearing. It's the iconic uniform that he wears. And we saw a high sale recently. It was a 5.5, but it was only $600. You know, I mean, the prior high was $444 on February 15th, so it's a big jump, but I still think that is an undervalued book for what it is. I mean, in low grades, you know, around 2.5, 2, you can still get it around $200. So I think that's a good book to try to pick up in almost any grade that you can get it in. Another one where we've got a big Daredevil Spider-Man crossover is Daredevil 16. Again, put it up here. And this is the first Spider-Man crossover in a titled series. And this is also the first John Romita art on Spider-Man. So, I mean, it's got a couple big things going for it. And higher grades are starting to get more pricey. They had been really undervalued for a long time. But a 7.5 recently sold for around $400. But the lower grades, you know, 6.5 and below, you can get for around $200 still. So I think that's a great book to pick up. You know, a big crossover, and the first time you have a major artist drawing a character that they're extremely well known for. Now, the last one is, this is the book that I really think you should go for if you can get it. And that is Daredevil number 2. This book really hasn't moved yet. It is still around the same price it's been for the last year. And it's a huge book. I mean, it's the second appearance of Electro, who has had major moves. He's in Amazing Spider-Man number 9, which that book has gone nuts. And it's also the second appearance of Daredevil. And so you've got 2 big second appearances, and a 7.0 sold for $600 on March 15th. I mean, that's nothing compared to what these other books are going for. When you're talking about Daredevil's first appearance selling for $16,000 in that grade, and then his second appearance selling for $600, I mean, that is a really, really big gap. And I think that it's the book that if you can find copies of that book right now, get it, because I think it is just, that is the book that is really going to pick up the most and has the most room out of the ones that I've mentioned here. So this time I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on Amazing Spider-Man. I think last week I had 3 ASM issues. So we're going to jump for the second one to Avengers number 1. A 3.5 sold this week for $4,320. And the last high sale for that book on February 19th was $3,499. So that's a pretty big jump, you know, $800 in about a month. And this is another one of those books, along with Daredevil number 1, that I think has been just criminally undervalued for a long time. I mean, it's the first appearance of the Avengers. I think it's finally starting to, you know, kind of like get its due, just like Daredevil. And it's a little strange to me that it's coming now. I mean, we've had so many Avengers movies, and that book really hasn't moved. And now while we're kind of in a lull, you know, of Avengers movies and that kind of news, it's starting to spike. And so I think it may kind of be a rising tides lifts all boats kind of situation that's bringing this book up, but it's also got Loki on the cover, and we've got the Loki series coming up, so that could be something that's driving it a bit. But it's getting really expensive in all grades. I mean, a 0.5 just sold for $1,500, and I'll throw a picture of it up here. I mean, it's missing, like that piece down in the corner there is completely gone for the whole book. It's not just the cover or anything. I mean, that's a huge chunk of that book that's missing. And I'm excited because I just got a copy of it, and it's hopefully in the mail right now. I was watching Very Gary's auction this weekend, and Jay put up a copy of Avengers number 1, and it's a low grade copy. You know, I would assume it's a 0.5, you know, maybe if, you know, the CGC gods shine down and I get a 1.0 or something, but I'm saying 0.5. And, you know, I purchased it for $900, and I thought that was a great price, and I'm very, very excited to get that book. Now, the alternative I would recommend for Avengers number 1 is just go to Avengers number 2. It's very similar to Daredevil number 2. That book is extremely cheap for being something that's so early, you know, such an early appearance of the Avengers. Now, it's not as cool of a cover as number 1. It's not as cool of a cover as Avengers number 4, you know, first Captain America. But it still goes for about $100 per, you know, grade point. And so a 3.5 sold on March 4th for $450. A 3.0 sold on February 17th for $327. So for a book that early that's, you know, kind of that important, I think that's a deal. So I think that's maybe the one to try going for right now if Avengers number 1 is kind of out of the realm of possibility of picking up a copy. All right, so the next book that I'm going to talk about is the other one that was in this box. It just happened to be that both these books were in this box, and so it's a great coincidence. Let's see here. And this one, I'm going to move away from Marvel for a bit, and I'm going to give DC some love because they're seeing some books start to move too. And this is, it is such a great cover. And this is Batman number 232. And this is the first appearance of Ra's al Ghul. It's the second appearance in cameo of Talia al Ghul. And a CGC 7.0 sold this week for $690. And it's this awesome Neil Adams cover. Ra's al Ghul's right on the cover. You've got Batman and Robin. It is a great cover, cool color. But I think it's always kind of overshadowed by Batman 227, which is the homage to Tech 31. But this one is the one that's actually the key issue. 227, it's an awesome cover. It's a great book, but it's not like a key event in Batman's history, but this one is. This is a first appearance of a major character, and kind of for comparison, I paid $325 for this on January 17th, and this is probably around a $600 book now. So kind of just having it sit in that box for a while really wasn't too bad of a decision. But this book is really starting to move, and I think if you're a Batman fan, it's time to get this book before it gets out of range on that price, because it's still a very reasonable book to get in some lower grades. With the CGC 7.0, the prior high was $578, and that was just on March 22nd, so a week ago. And it had sales as low as $377 on December 19th and $484 on February 11th. So it is really starting to move, but I think you can still find this book for a reasonable price. From a 2.5 to a 4.0, you can get it in the $200 to $300 range, which for a big key like that, I think is very reasonable. Now, it is a more modern book. It's 1971, so there might not be quite as many low-grade copies available, and so that's why you might have to kind of go up into that lower mid-grade, like a 4.0 or a 3.0. But I think it's a great book to look for to try to add to your collection if you're a Batman fan right now. Now, the next one, this was a set of sales that I saw that I just thought were cool, so I wanted to talk about these. Now, this was on Heritage Auctions, and they had 4 early Detective Comics books, but it wasn't the actual book. It was just the first 5 sheets from each of the issues, so it was just the Batman story. So it was 10 pages, just the Batman story, no cover or anything like that. And it was Detective Comics 30, 31, 36, and 38. So the first one, issue 30, sold for $1,080 for those 5 pages, so about $200 a page. And it's the 4th appearance of Batman. That's not a small deal. He's had, who knows, like 20,000 appearances, across all titles, maybe more than that. So it's a big deal, even though it's not a book that's known for something extremely important other than just being 4th appearance of Batman. Now, issue 31, that one sold for $1,620, so a little over $300 per page. And the thing that one's known for is it being a classic cover. So you're not really getting the thing that it's most famous for, but you're still getting 5th appearance of Batman and a piece of that very historic book. Issue 36 sold for $960. That was the cheapest one, a little under $200 per page. And then the most expensive was issue 38. And that is the first appearance of Robin, and it sold for $2,520, so $500 a page. And I'm going to say most of that was spent because of the first page, because the opening splash page is almost identical to the cover. It's Robin kind of like jumping out through the page, and that is what sells it, because you're getting almost the cover from the book on that first page. Now, 31 and 38, those are, they're all these are kind of like big boy books. These are expensive, but 31, a 1.0, sold last September for $43,200. So not such a bad deal, getting a few of those pages for $300 a page. And a 3.5 of 38 sold for $31,200 in November of last year, and a 5.5 sold for $86,400 in September. So again, getting a picture of that, Robin kind of jumping through the page is maybe it's not such a bad deal given what you've got to pay if you actually want a full, complete copy. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about, we're going to jump back into Marvel, and this is a run that has gotten extremely hot lately, and it is Fantastic Four issue 48. And this is the first appearance of Silver Surfer and the first cameo appearance of Galactus. And a CGC 3.0 sold for $1,550 this week. This is a book, as well as issue 49, that have just been completely on fire. A 3.0 sold for $1,300 on March 12th, and it was $995 on February 8th. So we're seeing very consistent moves up in that book. And it was a $700 to $800 book for most of last year in a 3.0, so it's doubled approximately. Now, it's a tough book to get under $1,000 now. I think you would struggle to find anybody willing to sell any copy of that book for under $1,000 at this point. But some alternatives are first issue 49. And so, let's see. There we go. So that's my copy of issue 49 back there. It is one of my favorite books. I have an 8.5, and I had been trying to keep upgrading it, but now, with everything that's happened, that book, I don't think I can ever upgrade it. It's so expensive now up in those grades. But you can still get them for under $1,000 in some grades. Now, a 4.0 recently breached that $1,000 mark with a $1,050 sale on March 18th. But a 2.0 sold on March 2nd for $400. So it's possible to get that book down in the $400, maybe $300 range. I mean, it's not going to be a pretty book, but you can get a complete copy. Now, the one I'd really recommend going after is issue 50. And if you watched my prior video on staining and tanning, I did an unboxing in that, and the book that I took out was this one, which is Fantastic Four number 50, which is the first solo cover of Silver Surfer. It's his third appearance, and it would be Galactus's second cameo, whatever you want to kind of call it. But this book really hasn't moved much yet. 48 and 49 have doubled or more in many grades over the last 1 to 2 months, but issue 50 really hasn't moved much. I mean, a 4.5 sold for $299 on March 11th. And there was a big sale at a 3.0 for $365 just a few days ago on March 26th. But for what this book is, I think that's still a pretty decent price. I mean, this is a book where, pretty high up, you can still get it fairly affordably. I paid, I think, $900 for this book, and in a 7.5, and I think it's over $1,000 book now, but there's a lot of grades below 7.5 where you can get into it pretty affordably. Like I said, in the 3s to 4s, you can get that book for just a few $100. And the other alternative is you don't have to go for one of these major keys, one of these early Silver Surfer or Galactus appearances. There are a ton of cool Silver Surfer and Galactus covers in both Fantastic Four and the Thor run. I mean, a lot of the Galactus origin type stories are all part of that Thor run. I mean, so you can go pick those books up, and they really aren't that expensive yet. And if we see Galactus appear on screen, you're definitely going to start to see those books move. So I would look through the Fantastic Four and Thor titles, and maybe pick out some cool books, either origin ones or just ones that have cool covers that you like, and go for those. I mean, I love Fantastic Four number 55. It's an awesome cover where Silver Surfer is fighting the Thing. And that's a great book that is still, I think, very undervalued, that I would recommend trying to pick up. All right, and so I've got to jump back to DC again, because there is another book that I feel I have to talk about with how crazy the prices on this book have gotten extremely quickly, and that's Hawkman number 4. I saw a 4.0 raw, so an estimated 4.0 raw, sell for $780 this week, and I mean, I personally sold a 1.8 for $450, and that was a book that I paid around $190 for in January. I mean, that's how much that book has moved, and that's because of the announcement we just had that there's a Zatanna movie coming. They have this incredible director lined up for it, and so people are really hyped on her right now. So, I mean, I just bought another copy of it this weekend. So, I mean, I sold mine, and then I got another one, but. Going into graded books, a 5.5 sold for $1,500 on March 22nd, and I mean, they're getting really expensive. I mean, that was a book that was probably $600, at most, maybe $500 a few months ago. Now, the alternative that I would recommend to that book, if you can't get kind of a reasonably priced copy anymore of Hawkman number 4, is DC Superstars number 11. It is a great Zatanna cover. It is her first solo story, and it's really affordable. I mean, a 9.0 sold for $160 on March 5th, 7.5 sold for $140 on March 22nd, 9.6 sold very recently, so kind of after that news, for $650 on March 23rd. So, I mean, it's a more modern book. It's from the 70s, but it's a book that is very reasonably priced up to some really high grades. You can get some great condition copies that aren't that expensive, and I could see that one after Hawkman number 4 starts getting really kind of prohibitively expensive. I can see a lot of people moving on to that book. Now, this last one, I could have done an entire video just on these. I probably could have done multiple videos on them. This is the hottest title out there. I had somebody ask me after my last video last week what I think the kind of the biggest moving title is right now, and it's X-Men. I mean, X-Men is crazy. And so all the books that I was watching this week for doing this video, I mean, almost every single one of them I highlighted. You know, it was a record sale or some standout sale. I mean, that title is nuts. And I mean, it's across the board. And the one I picked to talk about, and I like talking about books I have, you know, it makes it a little easier for me for editing because I don't have to get pictures and that kind of stuff, and it's also just fun showing books. So the one that I'm going to talk about is this, and this is X-Men number 12. And this is the first appearance of Juggernaut. It is one of the best covers, in my opinion, in the Silver Age for X-Men. I mean, it's Juggernaut right on the front, trashing the X-Men. And this book has, like all other X-Men key issues, gone just through the roof. And the sale I saw this week was a CGC 3.5 that sold for $840. And the last high sale was March 17th for $635. And so, you know, I mean, it's not the thousands of dollars that I've talked about for some of these other books, but I mean, $200 off a $635 book is a big, big move in about a week and a half. I mean, that's 30% in about a week and a half. And back in December 20th, a copy of the same grade sold for $350. And just some advice for me for people that are selling books: try not to sell books right before Christmas. If you don't need to, don't sell books right before Christmas, because everybody's already spent all their money on Christmas gifts. And if you try to auction a book right before Christmas, it is a recipe for you getting the low sale. Because another copy sold on November 28th for $450. So that $350 was definitely an outlier on the low side, but basically this book has doubled since November of last year. And for most of 2019 and 2020, it was a $300 book. I mean, it's about tripled since mid to earlier 2020 and 2019. And it's not a cheap book in any grade now. A 0.5 sold for $270 on March 28th, so just yesterday. So it's a pricey book. But one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this one is it has great alternatives. So issue 13, which I'll plug a picture in up here, is his second appearance. You know, it's not as great of a cover as this, in my opinion, because clearly I like red. So I like this red cover. So 13 doesn't have the red cover, but he's still right on the front. It's his second appearance. And a 3.5 sold for $145 on March 11th. So we're talking about 145 versus 840. I mean, that's 6 times as much. So you can get into that book much more affordably. And even an 8.0 sold on March 25th for only $800, and that was the high sale by 210. So that book's starting to move, but it's still just so cheap in comparison for such a major villain in the X-Men series. Now, there are some other books that you can go for outside of just X-Men 12 and X-Men 13. If you jump to X-Men 32 and 33, those are 2 more appearances that he has, and 33 is a really popular cover. That's a cool cover. And those ones, mid grades, you know, around 6s, go for $100 to $150. And if you're talking about even lower grades, you can get them for $20 to $30 in the kind of 2 to 3 range. So that is definitely a book that you can get into for that major villain, and you know, very affordably once you just start moving a little bit outside of that first appearance. So that's all the books that I wanted to talk about today. And like I said in the other one, I had so many that I marked that I can talk about, but I can only kind of pick and choose. And I try to pick some from DC and some from Marvel, get a little range and across the alphabet of the of the different book titles. But if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. And if there are any other good alternatives to some of these books, feel free to comment below. Love to talk about it and, hear the other recommendations. So, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.